Oh, it's showtime on a Tuesday night. And it was showtime at 49ers practice today, day 6 of training camp. And the fists came out today. The 49ers, Fred Warner, Brandon Aiyuk, fought a couple times, round 1 and round 2. I'm sure that you saw all over the internet. I went live right after practice, walking back to the press conferences, and everybody seemed really interested in the fight today. So my minute and 20-second long video made the rounds on the internet. But now we can actually sit down and talk about some more of the backstory. We could debate about whether or not it's good that the 49ers are fighting at training camp. I have some interesting historical perspective in that regard. And we can also talk about Trey Lance and company and Danny Gray, because Danny Gray is looking really good at training camp. There's a whole lot to talk about, and I have some highlights from camp today to play in video style for you as well. So welcome to tonight's recap show. It's August 2nd. 49ers have about a week of training camp in the books. It feels like it's been a month because so much has happened. Just think, last week at this time, we were just unpacking the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch introductory press conference. Well, since then, the 49ers have started training camp, done their non-padded practices, put on the pads, re-signed Deebo Samuel, talked a little bit of smack through press conferences at each other. I think the Brandon Aiyuk, in retrospect now, when he was calling Fred Warner irritating and annoying, it might have been a little bit personal, right? Because today they fought. Today they dropped everything and literally squared up. So if we want to, cameras weren't allowed during this part of practice because it was during team drills. But if you want the recap, why don't I just start right there? Early on, and this was, I believe, the first completion of practice, Trey Lance hits Brandon Aiyuk on a fairly short pass, and Aiyuk starts running upfield. Now, remember, the pads are on, so contact is allowed, but the 49ers aren't one of the few teams that tackles live to the ground. So there's a difference between contact being allowed and tackling live to the ground. The 49ers don't allow the latter. So there is some restraint that tacklers are expected to show. Now, Brandon Aiyuk caught the ball, started running upfield, and a horde of defenders, including Fred Warner, converged on him. There was contact. Aiyuk didn't go to the ground on the contact, but he took exception to how hard the contact was. Now, whether he took exception to it because it was Fred Warner initiating the contact or because it was actually too hard is unclear. Maybe it was a combination of both, but Aiyuk just went after Fred Warner. And within a second or two, both of them were on the ground, a little bit of a wrestling match, and a whole scrum formed around them. So that was round 1, but it took a little while from the coaches to pick guys up and get them out of the scrum. And that was like, okay, well, we've seen our first altercation of training camp. This is interesting because, as we know, there's history between Fred Warner and Brandon Aiyuk, like I just mentioned in that press conference. Why don't I open up the article that's in The Athletic about this? I wrote it today. I'm putting the link in the chat section so you can go ahead and check that out. And you could read along with me. I'm going to read this quote from the article right here. Fred Warner sees hooting and hollering. This is what I wrote the other day, and I called back to it this article. Fred Warner sees hooting and hollering as a tool that can raise intensity across the board. That's why there's been so much of it. Brandon Aiyuk, for one, has certainly taken notice. The wideout even noted that Warner was annoying and irritating after Wednesday's practice. This is last Wednesday. So then Warner was asked about this over the weekend. Why is Brandon Aiyuk calling you annoying and irritating? What do you have to say about that? Well, Warner explains, and I quote, specifically with Brandon, I chose him out. And I'll say why. I think he's ready to make that next step into playing at an elite level. I've gotten after him a bit because I know how much he has in him. And I know if I nag him a little bit, he's going to get sick and tired of that and start to hold his own. I like what I see out of BA. He works super hard, and he started to really gain that mindset of knowing he's a guy and he's capable. I'm trying to get the best out of him. That's it. So Fred Warner said, this is innocuous. This is for motivational purposes. That's the background. So I gave you round 1, then I gave you the background. So remember round 1, Aiyuk going at Warner, and it turns into a little scrum on the far side of the field, okay? Well, about 5 minutes later, this is when it got really crazy. Brandon Aiyuk isn't even in on the formation about 5 minutes later. The offensive players all stand behind the formation, behind the line of scrimmage. Kyle Shanahan likes standing there so you could see, it's like the Madden angle, right? He could see how the plays develop. So Kyle Shanahan stands there sometimes in the walkie-talkie, and he's calling the plays from that vantage point. That's where all of the offensive players who aren't currently in on the 11-on-11 action stand. So Brandon Aiyuk is standing in that reserve area. Defensive players who aren't playing, they stand on the sideline. So it's like an L shape of players that are currently on, quote unquote, the bench. So Aiyuk's not even in. Warner is, though. And there's a pass that's complete to 49ers wide receiver Marcus Johnson. Okay, so everything's innocuous. Pass over the middle of the field's complete. Number 6 makes the catch. And then Fred Warner pops him. And it's a pretty hard hit, but hits are legal now, right? The pads are on, so hits are legal. In fact, Fred Warner, just a few days ago before pads came on, was talking about how he was excited to thud people up because he thought that this was an important part of training camp. You got to thud people up. So Warner gives Johnson a good thud, right? It was a nice thud. Brandon Aiyuk was already displeased with Fred Warner. He's been displeased, it seems like, for several days. He comes sprinting from where he was watching this play onto the actual live playing field because he had deemed that Warner hit Johnson too hard. And Aiyuk is just, I had a perfect angle of this. He's barreling toward Warner. And as soon as he gets a few yards away, Brandon Aiyuk legitimately squares up. He legitimately squares up. And Fred Warner squares up too. And they're ready to throw punches at this point. And, this stuff moves really quickly, and it's in the middle of a bunch of football players on the field. It's near the defensive sideline. It's not far from anybody, really. The offensive sideline is behind the play. So everybody runs to get involved here. And it's probably a good thing that they do because I'm talking about Aiyuk and I'm talking about Warner squaring up. Well, they both have their helmets on. So there's no way that you want either of them, especially Brandon Aiyuk, throwing a punch at somebody with a helmet on. It's a good way to break your hand. So no punches ended up being thrown, at least based on what I saw. And I think that's a good thing. And it just ended up turning into this brawl where you had Robert Kemdiche having be yanked out of there by an assistant coach. You had Aziz Al-Shire. You had Dre Greenlaw involved. Just mayhem for about 10 to 15 seconds, right? And at the bottom of a pile that forms in this melee, I think, because it's just so hard to tell, but you would assume that Brandon Aiyuk and Fred Warner are at the bottom of the pile. So that summarizes the fight. I hope that you have the context for it as well, the appropriate context, because we talk about Fred Warner getting on Brandon Ayuk's nerves and Brandon Aiyuk finally snapped at practice. And to me, I look at the calendar and I see it's August 2nd. And August 2nd means it's the dog days of summer. And I don't think that there's a such thing as a proper training camp without a few fights, at least one fight. But we had 2 today. So what does that mean for the 49ers? It's going to be debated round and round. I come from the school of thought that football is a man's sport. This is an alpha sport. I think you have to put yourself in an extremely aggressive headspace to go out there and put your body on the line to play the game of football and to play it well. So especially at training camp, especially at this point, once the pads have come on, you've become overtly familiar with your teammates. If you're actually competing out there and you're trying to get something done, I'd be really surprised if there wasn't, and I quite frankly be probably disappointed if there, in a physical sport, if there wasn't some extracurricular physical activity. And today we saw that. Now, it can be debated whether or not, 1 or 2 fights in this case was too much. And Kyle Shanahan stopped play right after round 2, right after the second one. And Kyle Shanahan was visibly angry. And Kyle Shanahan essentially told the 49ers to cut it out. There is a balance that you have to achieve as the coach of a football team in these situations. You love to see the aggression. You love to see that they're in that headspace to be able to take out that aggression. And you love to see that they're competitive and that they care. But you also have to think about 2 things. You have to think about restraint that players are going to have to show, especially during the regular season, because as soon as you start retaliating for stuff in the regular season, the flags are going to start flying, right? And personal fouls are going to hurt your football team. But as a coach, you also have to think about practice efficiency. And if guys are fighting after every other down, you're going to lose snaps during the course of a training camp practice. And Kyle Shanahan didn't want to lose any more snaps. Today was the busiest practice so far of this training camp. The longest one, it went 2 hours for the 49ers. They actually went to a move the ball period at the end of practice, which means that the scrimmage wasn't just from a set down and distance. The scrimmage, the chains were moving. They were trying to simulate game situations. So Kyle wanted to get a lot of work done today. And after he saw Aiyuk and Warner and then 12 other guys get in on a brawl after round 2, he said, okay, enough of this. Let's huddle up. Let's cut the crap. Let's get over ourselves and move forward. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword for a coach. He loves to see the fire. He loves to see the competitiveness, but he doesn't want to waste time. And he wants his team to get this out of them now before the season, because flags will start flying during the regular season. Just remember Jawan Jennings. He did such a good job for the 49ers last year against Jacksonville, where, there was some shoving going on. Jennings, though, might have instigated some of that stuff, but not extracurricularly. And he just smiled and he took the punch with his helmet on, obviously. And he drew the flag against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you want to be the more disciplined team. Obviously, the season's still far away. So we're talking about training camp rules. And I think that if you don't see something in training camp, it's probably not a training camp that's competitive enough, just given the fact that football by nature is such a physical sport. So that leads me to this point. Guess another 49ers team that fought in camp and pissed off its coach. Well, it was none other than the 1994 49ers. I know this picture is from 1995, Jerry Rice and Deion Sanders, but this is an article that I wrote a couple years ago about the 49ers-Cowboys rivalry of the 1990s, which was epic. I'm sure many of you grew up on that like I did. But Gary Plummer, former 49ers linebacker, told me this story about William Floyd, bar none, right? William Floyd and Ken Norton Jr., who is the son of the legendary boxer Ken Norton Sr., who once defeated Muhammad Ali. Well, let's go through this and talk about some fights in training camp in that 1994 season. A legendary training camp for the 49ers in Stockton. That's back when they were in Stockton, I believe. Yeah, 1994. They're in Stockton, or were they in Rockland still? They were still in Rockland in 1994. They weren't in Stockton yet. They moved to Stockton, I think, after 98 or 1999. So this was in a Sacramento suburb. So let's take a look here. I have to put my little picture there in the bottom left corner. I'm going to read this to you guys because it was so reminiscent of what we saw today. Contact would often extend post-whistle. Helmets even came off when Plummer threw fists with Floyd. So Gary Plummer fighting William Floyd at 49ers practice before the last season that they won the Super Bowl. The offensive guys really rallied behind him because they had a guy that was willing to fight, Plummer said of the rookie fullback, nicknamed Bar None, in a phone interview. On another sweltering day of camp, it was hot today too, Plummer and Norton leveled a 49ers running back on consecutive plays in 7-on-7 drills. Normally a football no-no. Disgusted, the back hurled the football at Norton, igniting a full-on brawl. 49ers coach George Seifert halted practice. You offensive players asked me to go out and get some tough guys because we've been pushed around by the Cowboys in the last 2 years of the NFC Championship game, Seifert said, according to Plummer. So I went out and got a couple tough guys. Now shut the hell up and play football. Sounds a whole heck of a lot like angry Kyle Shanahan today, especially the shut the hell up and play football part. Gary Plummer said about this, it was like somebody who just gave you carte blanche to light people up in practice. That was the moment that these guys understood that this is what it's like to play against a bunch of mean, tough defensive players. Their attitude literally started to change at that point. Now, let me make this clear. I think that Brandon Aiyuk's attitude has long already changed. I think that he's developed into a hard-nosed player. I think being exposed to Deebo Samuel, who's obviously a hard-nosed player, he's no finesse offensive player, has been really good for Brandon Aiyuk. And to me, when I look at a situation like this, obviously the 49ers defense is a hard-nosed defense. They've earned their pedigree here over the past 3 years. And Fred Warner, all-pro Fred, as they like to call him, he's one of the leaders of that unit, if not the leader of that unit. I think this is hard-nosed player against hard-nosed player, because all that we were talking about entering this practice was about how good Brandon Aiyuk has looked throughout camp. So this is not some underperforming guy looking to start a fight because he's frustrated. I think this is a true competitor. They use the term, he's got that dog in him, right? Well, people are talking about Brandon Aiyuk having that dog in him. They're showing that X-ray, that meme online. It has like a guy's ribs, and you could see the dog in the ribs. Well, Brandon Aiyuk has the dog in him. And Fred Warner's got some dog in him, obviously. Fred Warner has been trying to get the dog out of Brandon Aiyuk. But I think Fred, when you look at his quote from the other day, he's saying it's already there for Brandon Aiyuk. So you have these two aggressors going at it on the practice field. And I think it's a good thing for the 49ers. They have aggressors on both sides of the ball. Now, to Kyle Shanahan's point, they need time to practice too. They can't just spend all of this time fighting, but at least they have that mentality. And I think that's a mentality that you do need. So we're going to talk about the fight a little bit more in a few minutes. I want to go through the rest of what happened in practice today. We had a Jimmy Garoppolo sighting. Why don't we take a look at video from the practice field? There he is. That's former 49ers coach Steve Mariucci with Jimmy Garoppolo. We weren't allowed to film Jimmy Garoppolo, but the throws that he did make today look good. The shoulder looks healthy, and he's building up endurance. Remember, August 30th is the inflection point for the 49ers in that regard, because they don't owe Jimmy Garoppolo any of his $24.2 million base salary until if and when he makes the 53-man roster on that date. So they have some time to see if the quarterback market evolves before then without losing anything financially. Here's some more sights from practice today. Trey Lance running around in the foreground. You see Juwan Jennings, who I just talked about a little bit earlier. We'll touch on Jennings a little bit later in this show. Brock Purdy and Trey Lance throwing. There's Danny Gray, who really has been shining. I could put that down on the screen. Danny Gray has been shining. Austin Mack for the 49ers. Now back to Trey Lance. You're just going to see a series of throws. This is a Lance and Garoppolo-centric video with that one clip of Garoppolo and then Lance throwing to Marcus Johnson there at the end. That was the guy that got decked there by, well, he didn't get decked because he didn't fall to the ground. He just got thudded up by Fred Warner. And that thud up, well, that drew the ire of Brandon Aiyuk and started the conflict that we have been talking about. So I also have a video of Trey Lance throwing in slow motion that I put up on YouTube that I'll probably play in this clip as well, just so you guys have a look at everything that I've put up today. But we unfortunately couldn't get video of the fight, so I hope that my description of it will suffice. Lance and the footwork, looking left, looking right, working with Brian Griese, and then Nate Sudfeld, obviously, is going to go take his turn at that drill. So, 49ers practice today. I said that Danny Gray is shining. Gray had two deep catches from Nate Sudfeld, where his speed was on full display. The second one, he beat Ambry Thomas. And Ambry Thomas was on him. It wasn't like Ambry Thomas was roasted, but Danny Gray made a good catch at the point of reception, which I thought was very important, considering the fact that, the big question with him is going to be strength. How is he going to adapt to the NFL level as far as out-muscling guys? Because we already know he's fast. And it's been verified that the 49ers are going to try to use Danny Gray to stretch out the field, blow the top off of opposing defenses, because he's already caught several of these deep passes, mainly from Nate Sudfeld, over the course of training camp. But today he caught a contested deep one, and he caught it against Ambry Thomas. And I thought that was notable. And I also thought that the fact that Danny Gray caught a couple intermediate passes, and it looks like his hands are sticky during this training camp, is also notable. Whereas Gray is playing really well, I think that Juwan Jennings is struggling a little bit more. Jennings yesterday dropped the pass in the end zone. He had it in his breadbasket, but then Dante Johnson knocked it out right near the pylon. That wasn't good. Today, there was some nice blanket coverage from Quantrez Knight, the undrafted free agent slot cornerback for the 49ers, on Juwan Jennings, and he was able to knock the pass away. Jennings didn't get enough separation. We haven't really seen Jennings just, grab hold of too many balls from either Trey Lance, Nate Sudfeld, or Brock Purdy as these receivers have rotated through. And I think that's something that the 49ers would like to see more of here in training camp. Now, pads have just now come on, and I think Juwan Jennings is a exceptionally physical football player who set a tone for the 49ers in that style of game last year. And I think that as training camp continues, a guy like him stands to really benefit. But as of right now, Danny Gray has shined a lot, and Juwan Jennings has not shined nearly as much. And remember that Juwan Jennings really earned his spot on this football team last year with a really good training camp. So that's something that we're going to monitor moving forward. Also thought it was a nice day for Ty Davis-Price, 49ers rookie running back. I'm going to stick to my guns, though, and say that it's tough to evaluate the running back position before tackling to the ground happens. But I've liked Ty Davis-Price, and I've liked Jordan Mason as far as their movement abilities out of the backfield. 49ers did move the ball work late in practice today. That was the last thing that they did. And they faced a third down and really long. The second team offense got itself in a big time hole. Maybe 3rd and 18, 3rd and 19, somewhere like that. It was a false start penalty and then a sack. And Nate Sudfeld threw a screen, and they got it to Ty Davis-Price. Good hands, caught the ball. And he showed some nice wiggle and some nice burst to get away from the defense and pick up 17 or 18 yards to the point where the 49ers set up a 4th and 1, and they picked up the 4th and 1 by handing off to JaMychal Hasty. The fact that Ty Davis-Price has shown the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, and he shows burst with NFL athletes around him on the field at his weight at 220 pounds, I think that's really promising because we know the guy's going to be able to pass protect at his size. That was one of his strong suits at LSU. And, you know, we know that he can move, but we just don't know how that's going to relate to the NFL level. He moved at the SEC level. The NFL level is something different. So I've been impressed with Ty Davis-Price's movement abilities here at the NFL level, especially today on that little screen pass that he caught on the 3rd and long. And you know what? Jordan Mason, who's the undrafted free agent running back out of Georgia Tech, he's 220 plus as well. And the last couple of days, he's made a couple catches out of the backfield, especially the other day when he caught one from Brock Purdy and took off. And it's like, wow, he can move too. And that's the thing about this 49ers running back group this year. They've gotten heavier, but it seems they've maintained at least some sort of explosiveness. And I think that's going to bode well for this team moving forward. If you want to talk about Trey Lance specifically, he went 10 of 19 today. That was, I mean, he's at 50% exactly for all of training camp right now, completion rate. He was under 50. Today he got up to 50, so he's hovering right around there. It was the 49ers' first day since day one without throwing an interception. Maybe something, maybe part of that had to do with the fact that Charvarius Ward got the day off. No Charvarius Ward, no top cornerback, makes it a little bit easier on the offense. But no interceptions for Lance, Sudfeld, or Purdy. Trey went 10 of 19. I think it might have been his best day of camp as far as we saw the most stability and consistency out of him. There was nothing jarringly bad from Trey Lance today, but there was also nothing stupendously good from Trey Lance today. He was 10 of 19. That's okay. It was neither great nor terrible. But hey, the 49ers probably would like to live on the side of stability with Trey Lance instead of the wild ups and downs because we know that this defense should be really good. The special team should be improved. So if Lance can be stable, he doesn't have to be spectacular as he builds and develops really behind the scenes, then I think this team has a chance to be really good. Let's take a look at Trey Lance throwing today in slow motion. Those of you who are interested in the throwing motion, you have it right here. It is a little bit unconventional. I kind of like the way that he flicks his hand at the end. That doesn't really change much about how the ball comes out. People don't like the little bit of a dip here, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was last season. In fact, I could rewind this and I'll stop it right here. Last season, Trey Lance was dipping to the level of the towel with his throw. He has tightened up the release, and I think he's tightened it up significantly. Right here, I'll stop it again. He's above the towel with the ball. Last year, we could find video, and he was dipping to the level of the towel. And the thing is, every millimeter of dip that, is unnecessary is going to give these ultra speedy edge rushers more of a chance to beat their offensive linemen, reach around and strip the football. So it's important to keep that release as compact as possible. Now, keep in mind, this is also in slow motion. You're going to get to see this from 3 different angles. This is even better. You could tell from this angle that this did not dip all that far. That's above his shirt, right? Jimmy Garoppolo able to keep the ball high, keep that release nice and tight. And I think the fact that, Lance has shortened the dip is notable. And now we're going to go to full speed for the last throw because I don't want you to think that his release is that slow. That's a nice snappy release. He gets the ball out to Marcus Johnson. So there's Trey Lance today, 10 of 19, nothing great, nothing terrible. And the 49ers hope that more stability continues coming for Trey Lance as this training camp continues. So that's my brief summary of the day. Those of you who are just joining, this is the piece about practice and Fred Warner and Brandon Aiyuk. Well, it's not up there right now. Here we go. Check that sucker out. I'm going to put the link into the comment section, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Deebo Samuel, who actually also had his post-practice press conference today. And as I talk about Deebo Samuel, I'll read a couple of quotes that I got from him at this press conference. I guess the 49ers audio went out, so people were happy that I posted the video of the press conference on the channel. You're welcome. It was an accident. I just figured it was a noteworthy press conference because it was the first time that we had heard Deebo speak publicly to the media since the end of last season. So we hadn't heard from him throughout all of the contract drama. He didn't say anything too earth-shattering, but there are a couple things worth relaying to you. So why don't we get a Deebo Samuel title up here for those just coming onto this show. On Deebo Samuel right there. All right, Deebo Samuel is now on the screen. And John Lynch shared with us the first thing that Deebo told him after signing his contract on Monday, quote, "It's time to go to work." John Lynch also fell off of his bike right after the 49ers signed Deebo Samuel. His wife, Linda, told him, okay, it's time to get outside, get some air. And John Lynch wasn't wearing a helmet and had a bike accident, literally fell off his bike. So I guess he bruised his face up pretty good. So he doesn't want to show his face now. I'm not kidding. This is serious stuff. John Lynch doesn't want to show his face. So he did a press conference with us via conference call because he fell off of his bike. He can't make this stuff up right after the Deebo Samuel contract. He said he's not hurt, though. Only his ego is bruised. And it sounds like his face is bruised, too. But other than that, John Lynch doing okay. By the way, quick little pivot. It was surreal today. Jimmy Garoppolo's throwing on the side field at practice, and you pan over, and Trey Lance is throwing on the practice field, the actual one. And then not far from Trey Lance, Kyle Shanahan is throwing to his son Carter and Carter's friend on the practice field. So you had Kyle Shanahan, the coach, throwing the football. You had Trey Lance, obviously the 49ers' top quarterback on the depth chart right now, throwing the football. And then the guy they're trying to trade, Jimmy Garoppolo, throwing the football about 30 or 40 yards away. All kind of, I was standing in the epicenter of these three things happening. So that was wild. John Lynch also said, no real update on the Jimmy Garoppolo situation. Quote, we'll stay patient through this one as well, and we'll come to a great conclusion for everybody involved. And if the Deebo Samuel saga should have taught us anything, it's to be patient regarding this Jimmy Garoppolo saga as well. It's business, and sometimes business doesn't move as fast as people on social media want it to move. All right, more on Deebo Samuel. As I scroll toward what he said in his press conference. Man, I tweet a lot. Surprise myself. Right here. Here's a good one. Somebody asked Deebo Samuel about the running back usage, if he was actually upset about that or if that was just a false report or false reports over the course of this offseason. And Samuel said, that's false. There were a lot of things that came out that I wanted to speak on, but at the end of the day, I wasn't allowed to. You can turn on the tape. Go back to the Cowboys game. It kind of shows what kind of player I am. And also, you go turn on the Pro Bowl tape and what I said about being a wide back. I don't mind doing whatever it takes for this team to win. So, boom, shot down. Another false media narrative. Deebo, and if you look at the contract, money speaks as well. Nothing in Deebo Samuel's new contract is preventing him from being a running back. In fact, it is the essence of Deebo Samuel to want to play everywhere. That's what makes him such a unique player. He wanted the football against the Dallas Cowboys on that critical touchdown run. That's why he's referencing that play. He has a second gear when he hits that open field. I mean, Deebo Samuel is a special player, and it would be absolutely asinine for Deebo Samuel to want to take away part of what makes him such a special player. So he shot that down at the press conference. And he also said, at this point, they're just making up stuff. That was his comment towards some of the media reaction to what he was doing, how he felt this offseason. Couldn't talk. Didn't say that he regretted requesting the trade, but said it was just part of the business. And said that the media made up a whole bunch of stuff over the course of this offseason. But it's all settled now. The 49ers have Deebo Samuel under contract. All right, so I think I've gone over everything. Why don't I open up the comments section, check out what's going on over here. Oh, man. Vince Scully died. Man, my dad just texted me as well. R.I.P. to Vince Scully. Yes, the voice of the catch. Vince Scully said, "It's a madhouse at Candlestick." That was his famous line during the catch. I know a lot of you are probably Giants fans. I'm sure we got some Dodger fans in here too. Obviously, Vince Scully, best known as the voice of the Dodgers, but he also did call the most iconic moment in NFL history, the catch. Joe Montana to Dwight Clark. And I don't know the exact words of the whole call, but I always remember the crowd in that epic shot as the camera was panning over the early evening, late afternoon crowd at Candlestick, and Vince Scully saying it's a madhouse at Candlestick. And that's something I definitely want to tweet right now. Vince Scully. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to lose. I'll tweet in a little bit. Don't have to do it immediately. Tom Brady was in that crowd. Tom Brady was there. I don't think Adam Peters was there. Lon Simmons also called the catch. He called it on the radio, right? Vince Scully was on TV. Man, history right there. A madhouse at Candlestick. Yeah, we lost Vince Scully and Bill Russell within a couple days of each other. Two absolute icons in the sporting world. Just kind of holding a moment of silence here. I guess the Dodgers announced it about 30 minutes ago. Vince Scully called the most iconic moment in NFL, in 49ers and NFL history. All right, tweet is out there. Questions about 49ers practice. Let's go. He does deserve this moment. That's why I'm taking my time before fielding some questions about 49ers practice. But if you do have those questions, let's start to talk. Because today was an interesting one. I mean, we've changed gears here. We're talking about fights at practice. Then we're talking about Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. Now RIP to Vince Scully. And now Mike is asking a good question. Is this the most competitive camp you've seen by the 49ers? Well, it was definitely the most intense fight that I've seen. I thought 2019 was a really competitive camp. You know, people are misrepresenting the Garoppolo 5 interceptions. A lot of people, for some reason, are acting like it happened last year. That's not true. It happened in 2019 when Garoppolo was coming off his ACL. And what that showed us, those 5 picks from Garoppolo in 19, was that the 49ers had a legit defense. And that got fleshed out, of course, over the course of the season. So whenever 19 was really, really competitive during training camp, and the 49ers had a Super Bowl bound team. This season's really competitive too, and they're talking about the Super Bowl. It's still way too early to say if they have a Super Bowl bound team, but I would say this camp is damn competitive, and there's a chance that the 49ers go far just based on the competition level that I'm seeing out there on the practice field. Vibes do seem pretty good out of camp. Yeah, I would say. I mean, the 49ers are talking Super Bowl. Shanahan himself has intimated that this is the best roster that he's had with the 49ers. It's one of those things where the 49ers, their demeanor, the way that they're carrying themselves, the stuff that they're saying, feels like they're going to be a true contender this year. Now, whether or not that materializes on the field, obviously there's going to be a disconnect there, but part of the battle is how they're mentally wired for this. And I think that's on a good track. And that's all that we could say at this point. How come Lance doesn't wear colored visors like Deebo? Wouldn't that make it harder for defenders to look at his eyes? It's a good point. And I guess at the pro level, every small thing matters. Maybe Trey's watching right now and he'll come out with a colored visor tomorrow. Get hooked up by the equipment staff. Let's say the next week is used as trial and error on the offensive line. Do you believe there'll be a market improvement on the level of play once they establish consistency? You would hope so. I mean, they have a new center, and the center is the communication pivot point of the offensive line. So you have Brendel and Brunskill rotating and competing there right now. Alex Mack was, the centerpiece, pun intended, for the 49ers last year. Whoever replaces him is going to have to make sure that the communication's in line, that the whole offensive line is operating on a cohesive level, and that could take some time. We've only just finished 6 practices of training camp, and there's usually 17 or 18 practices, so still time to wait on that front. Devonair McAllister, how was Danny Gray? Really good today. I'm guessing you just joined. I talked about him a little bit earlier. Caught a couple deep passes from Nate Sudfeld. He's fast. He's impressing me. The offensive line is the elephant in the room. And you think the elephant's going to sit on the head coach. Yeah, that's a disturbing picture there. That definitely would crush Kyle Shanahan because an elephant's pretty big. But, I mean, it's an elephant in the room, but people are normally afraid to talk about elephants in the room. I've talked about it for years now. It's a concern. It remains a concern. And the 49ers have to figure out a way for it to stop being a concern. I mean, some of it can be taken care of by the fact that Trey Lance might be a bit escapable, right? He can get away from some of the pressure, but not all of it. And the line has to show up and the line has to improve for the 49ers to reach their goals. Tarvarius Moore had 2 interceptions the other day. He's looking better and better as time goes on since the Achilles injury. They do need to address the offensive line, and they think they addressed it this offseason, and they think they're addressing it with development right now. So let's wait and see what happens. But it definitely is an area to be concerned with. All right, guys. 37 minutes now. I'm going to go do some tweeting. I'm going to go find a video on the internet of the catch at Candlestick. Vince Scully saying it's a madhouse at Candlestick. Thanks for giving me the heads up here in the chat section. I got a few texts as well, so thank you to everybody for that. Hope you enjoyed today's look-in. There's a ton of content up on the channel, a ton of content on The Athletic. Why don't you subscribe to both? Do us all a favor. Subscribe to The Athletic, subscribe to the channel. Once again, that link is in the comment section or in the chat section right now as I sign off. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.